Oh my God, they're letting us do it. They're letting us do it. This is it. It is fourth down in the Steel City version 2.0. Fourth down in the Steel City, your place for daily insight, opinions, hot takes, and everything else you could possibly want for the Steelers. And Steelers fans, we are here for you. I'm Chris Mack. He's Josh Taylor. Both of us occasionally allowed to do things for 93.7 The Fan. Josh always allowed to do things for KDKA TV2 and CBS Pittsburgh, where randomly he'll invite me on sometimes as well. But we are here every single day to talk Steelers with you. So, Steelers Nation, what do you want to talk about? I know what we've got to talk about. Before we get into any of it, Josh, before I allow you to say hello to everybody out there watching on YouTube and listening inside their Odyssey app or however they get their podcasts, a reminder, if you have not already, follow, subscribe, rate, review, all the things you need to do for Fourth Down in the Steel City to make sure that all of your friends are locked in as well. Be sure to hit that notification bell on the YouTube screen. And whenever there are new videos available, you'll get them. And that's the whole show. The whole show will get posted to YouTube every single day as well. We are locked in here. And yes, they've allowed us to do this thing, Josh. New world order. Why are they allowing us to do this?
They either don't know. That's actually my money is on them just not knowing, or they're just incredibly bored and they're like, okay, and they're sick of us bothering them. And I'm glad you mentioned that we're doing Fourth Down in Steel City, because I thought I was just trapped in my basement or trapped in my attic for no reason. I figured I was just on punishment or something. So I'm glad it's this and not somebody else.
Nobody puts Josh in the corner.
For those watching on YouTube, ignore all of this behind me. We are renovating the attic space, which will soon be my office. So it'll look a lot better in about a week and a half. So just, bear with me for a little bit. Just ignore the bad stuff. Then again, I'm here, so maybe it's bad to ignore the bad stuff. I don't know. We'll see. It depends on how you feel about this episode that will determine what exactly is the bad stuff, I guess. We'll see.
True. Not bad. The man who will do his damnedest to keep us in line, our producer, Greg Finley. Greg, pop in and say hello real quick to everybody.
Hey, everybody.
There's Greg.
This.
Yeah.
This is the tortured soul who's stuck with us for the duration.
Sorry, Greg.
Poor Greg.
I got to keep you guys on topic, on time, and keep the Mitch Hedberg jokes to at least 5 per episode.
Well, I mean, in fairness, Greg, we used to talk about the Steelers. We still talk about the Steelers, but we used to too.
There's one.
Mitch Hedberg reference number 1. All right, there we go. I think we are
one
ready.
already. We're not even 5 minutes in. That's how we do it.
No, I think we're ready to go. Let's start with the cut down day chaos for this team, gentlemen. Kevin Dotson traded to move up. I mean, who knows? It could be anywhere from like 30 to 40 picks in a couple of different rounds of the draft. Kendrick Green somehow pawned off on the Houston Texans for a 6th round pick. Zach Gentry released, which I think was a tiny bit of a surprise to some people. Desmond King brought in just the last few hours since before we sat down to talk about this. So, Josh, let's start here. I like the 53. I think there are a couple soft spots to talk about here and there, especially dependent on injuries. But I think this is probably the best 53 they've gone into a season with in 4 or 5 years.
I was going to say we're probably talking 2016 was the last time, or maybe the start of 2017 pre-Ryan Shazier injury was probably the last time this roster looked this complete. I won't even say good, but I'll say complete. It's just complete. It's not only is it complete, it's pretty deep. I mean, we used to see this roster be the past couple of years. It felt like a mile wide and an inch deep. Now it feels a lot more deep and a lot less wide. So I'm feeling a lot better about that. I feel the same way you do. I think injuries could be a problem with this team, but it's only at a couple spots now. It used to be where injuries at a couple spots weren't as important, and you worry about where the specific ones are. Now it's more minimized. It's like, okay, injuries not only a couple places might be critical, but everywhere else you might be okay.
Yeah, the one spot I have an eye on, actually there's 2 spots. I'm not going to lie. There's 2 spots I'm kind of worried about. You tell me if I should be worried about these or not. Like interior line, if there's an injury to Mason Cole or one of these guards goes down, Look, I'm okay with Nate Herbig, having to step in for a week or two if it comes down to it. I'm okay, I think, if, Spencer Anderson can't possibly snap the ball farther over quarterbacks' heads than Kendrick Green used to if he's called upon
Very
to do
true.
so. So I think I'm okay with those guys being the interior backups along the offensive line. I would have preferred had they been able to hold on to a Dotson, for example, as an interior backup, but I understand that's probably a luxury, and they weren't necessarily ecstatic about the way he played last year at times. So that is one soft spot, the interior line reserves. And then I do still have my questions. I thought they would keep more at safety, aside from like KZ and Neal. I like them both. I do. But I do worry if there's an injury to one of those guys, if they need to do more, if they need to find more pieces as they stitch together the Frankenstein that is going to be their other safety next to Minkah Fitzpatrick, if they've got enough pieces, or if the Frankenstein that they stitch together between KZ and Neal will be like missing the lower half of its right leg some weeks and missing a forearm other weeks, and it's just sort of slowly ambling towards the sidelines. Like I like them both, but I only like them enough. I'm not necessarily excited about them. I want Minkah to be free to just play center field and be back there ball hawk.
Yeah, I'm with you on the safety position. I had this discussion at the barbershop a couple weeks ago. I was asked about it. You said, well, are they going to be able to keep Kenny Robinson? I said, it's not whether or not they want to keep it, or are they going to keep him? I said, it's not going to be whether or not they want to keep him. It's going to be whether or not they're able to keep him, because there's so many different kind of pieces jumbled together, like you talked about at the safety position. And oh yeah, by the way, they also didn't keep Trey Norwood, who was a guy who would fill in occasionally at the safety position. So that creates even more questions surrounding it. So now you're looking at, no Trey Norwood, no Marcus Allen. They didn't bring Terrell Edmonds back. So all of that is changing. And now you kind of have this rotating DeMonte KZ, Keanu Neal, or if they go to that big dime sub package, you may have both of them with Minkah Fitzpatrick. So now you have kind of this whole morphing, changing thing. It kind of looks differently, but here's one thing that kind of probably offsets that. The addition of Patrick Peterson, I think, makes this looks a lot more palatable, because you're already hearing Peterson talk about how he can move around and how different guys are going to do different things, and how you might see some corners doing things that safeties do and safeties doing things that slot corners do. So there are going to be some moving pieces around here. I'm wondering just how much they'll get out of him doing that with the veteran presence that he has. So yeah, safety is a concern to me. Interior line, I agree with you, especially considering the fact, remember the thing they talked about at the end of last season? All 5 of those guys played in every game and none of them got hurt. And Omar Khan said it, Mike Tomlin said it, Pat Meyer said it. Hey, this doesn't happen every day. Usually someone goes down, so we kind of dodged a bullet here. So if the law of averages is telling you anything, one of these guys is going to get hurt, and if for their sake, you're hoping it's a tackle. Because if it's a guard, I feel the same way you do. I wasn't as surprised about Kevin Dotson being moved. I said this at the end of last year, and this is something that I don't think people really pay attention to or don't point out. There were 2 times last season where Kenny Pickett was hit by a blitzing linebacker and left the game with a concussion. Both times that linebacker came in the same gap. And that was Kevin Dotson's gap. And I said this at the end of the season. If you're that guy who allowed that to happen twice, you're probably not going to be on the field much longer. And I think they knew, hey, we cannot allow this to go any further. When they brought in Isaac Seumalo, you knew, okay, he's not going to be on the field with the ones anymore, because Isaac Seumalo, for all intents and purposes, he might be a couple of ones on this line, because him being on this line alone has made it look a lot better. So you knew that Dotson's time with the ones was coming to an end. Whether or not he was going to stay on the roster would probably depend on the guys around him. Same thing with Kendrick Green. And I guess they figured, hey, we can get draft picks for both and take our chances elsewhere. So that's what they decided to do. And good on Omar Khan for getting not only a pick for Kendrick Green, but getting pick swaps for the guy who missed his block and got his quarterback concussed twice. He got pick swaps for that guy. That's some masterful work right there.
Yeah, we're going to get into the con artist, because Omar coming in just a couple of minutes. Back to the interior line for just a second. I think the key with Kevin Dotson, and you point out the sacks that he gave up, the hits that he gave up last year, he had hit his ceiling. Unfortunately, Kevin Dotson was never going to get any better. decent in the run game, right? Sometimes very good in the run
game. That was
game.
his strength, really.
Right, yeah. He was a mauler at times, but never really improved enough in pass pro to be that guy. Say Amalu has the complete game. And as far as the safeties go, I'll be honest, I thought they were going to keep more safeties and fewer corners. But that point that you brought up about what Pat Pete said, that, hey, we've got the kind of guys, and Patrick Peterson is one of them now. We've seen Joey Porter Jr. work inside during camp of the preseason. Desmond King is obviously one of these guys who spent half the year, almost exactly half the year inside and half the year outside last year. So they've got guys that, as long as you're not talking about a box safety, and let's be honest, Quan Alexander can kind of function like a box safety at times, especially in rundowns. So, they're probably using 3-4 different guys to replace the one role that Terrell Edmunds played. But I wonder if they're not going to get better play out of all of those different aspects. Look, there's nothing against Terrell Edmunds.
No,
he was
not at all.
Good enough many weeks. I just wonder if they're not going to be able to. They're going to have more boom or bust potential, I think, at all of these different spots where Edmunds used to plug in, whether it be in the secondary or sort of on the edges of the box.
I think the best way to describe it for what the situation is now compared to what it was with Terrell Edmunds for the past couple of years, I think they're going to get a lot more of the things Terrell Edmunds couldn't do done better, and maybe the things that he could do probably done around the same level. So it feels like, okay, we're losing this guy and what he does. Okay, fine. But there were some things he couldn't do too, and those kind of get filled in with a little bit more of a wider repertoire. So it's you're right. They're taking pretty much 2 or 3 different guys and kind of shoving them, the what's the word for proverbial 10 pounds into a 5-pound bag for a position. That's what they're doing. But it doesn't make it a bad thing, because now the things that were weaknesses for Terrell Edmunds, one of those things is a strength for Keanu Neal. One of those things is a strength for DeMonte KZ. One of those things is a strength for Patrick Peterson. So now you got different guys that can do a lot of the things he did well and maybe a little bit better. And you mentioned Quan Alexander because one of the things Terrell Edmunds was pretty good at was defending tight ends. So now if you got a linebacker, whether it's Quan Alexander and maybe even Cole Holcomb, we saw a little bit out of him in that Atlanta game of what not even just being able to run, but how he actually sees and processes the field, dropping back into zone coverage. And I got a chance to work with Ryan Shazier for that Atlanta game, or I should say was the Atlanta game? No, Buffalo the second preseason game, Buffalo game.
Yeah.
And he talked about, how there's a couple of different ways that coaches teach linebackers how to read what they see around them when they're playing in zone. And he broke down pretty much in detail what Cole Holcomb did and how he made that play. So when you hear that from another inside linebacker about what an inside linebacker is doing well, and it just happened to be, the guy who was on pace to be arguably one of the best inside linebackers in this team's history before his unfortunate injury, you pay attention to that. So Cole Holcomb is a guy that intrigues me, and he's really, and Shazier was impressed with Quan Alexander too and everything he does. So as much as we talk about the safety position, let's not leave out the linebacker position. That's been a complete overhaul too, but it is one for the better.
One last move for this 53 that I wanted to mention that we touched on off the top, that I don't want to say I'm a big fan of cutting somebody, especially somebody who's been one of those low-key productive players over the last few years. It's nothing against Zach Gentry. It's not.
No,
He'll catch on somewhere. He's a good blocking tight end. He's a large human who's gonna help somebody somewhere. But this means #Darnell Washington season has begun. And this man, look, I've tried to explain it to people. Everybody's asked me after spending a few days at camp a couple weeks ago, well, what about what surprised you the most? What surprised you the most? Darnell Washington. The man is the size of an offensive tackle, but can move like a wide receiver. He is going to, if he does not catch at least 5 touchdown passes this year, I'll be shocked. He is going to be a massive, and I mean that both literally and figuratively, red zone target for this team. I have never seen a man of that size move that nimbly, Josh.
It's time for us to show our age 15 minutes into the show, Chris. I'm going to bring up a name of a tight end that some people are going to be like, who? But guys in our age bracket, us Gen X and millennial cuspers, we're going to know this name. Remember Eric Green?
Oh,
remember how large of a human Eric Green was?
Liberty's finest.
And remember how well he can move for a guy that big and how athletic and agile he is? Take him and make him bigger and a better run blocker. That's Darnell Washington. Like, I'm not
Yes.
even like trying to be funny, but like we thought Eric Green was a phenomenon. Like, what, 25 years ago? We thought Eric Green was like some rarity. Then you see Darnell Washington, you're going, that guy plays tight end? It's crazy because there was a nice little series of jokes going between myself and Chris Carter. Shout out to Chris. And one of our cohorts on Twitter. Shout out to JB. And we always joked about that. Man, if you could get Darnell Washington on this group, just how fun would it be? And we got closer to the draft, and I'm like, okay, since I won it, it's not going to happen. And they're like, oh, man, Darnell Washington. I was like, stop giving me hope. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Then it happens, and I'm like, wait, what? They actually did it? They brought him in? And for me, it was like, it was me looking at the possibilities. It was me looking at what they can do with just 12 personnel, with one running back, 2 tight ends, and 2 receivers on the field. Because now you could put Darnell Washington as the inline guy and put Pat Freiermuth in the slot and torture linebackers. Or you could put them both on the line of scrimmage. You could put Washington on the same side as Pat Freiermuth and move him across the formation if you want to, just to give you a, hey, this guy's coming in front of whoever has the ball.
And then just pop a Connor Hayward in there too.
Or just pop a Connor Hayward in there. You can do so many different things just with this group of tight ends alone. And you're right. You hate to lose Zach Gentry just because of that extra added, ability to block that you have. But you got Pat Freiermuth who can catch the ball. You got Darnell Washington who can block really, really well and catch the ball a little bit. Then you got Connor Hayward who can do both, and he can run the ball if you want him to. We've seen him be that guy on the wing at the tight end position and come in jet motion and take a carry and close out a couple games last season. So you have a lot of versatility just with the tight end group alone. That makes this offense a lot more effective, and it allows you to do a lot more things that you might not have been able to do previously.
Something that hasn't happened in years for the Pittsburgh Steelers has happened now this preseason, this offseason, through the preseason, and into week 1. Years it's been since they pulled this off. We tell you what that is next as we talk about Omar coming. Omar, y'all. Omar coming. That next. Hey, yo. Don't make me huff and puff. Next, right here on 4th Down in the Steel City. And we're back inside 4th Down in the Steel City. Omar coming. We'll get to that in just a minute. I can't believe they've let us continue on through a second segment, Josh, but here we are.
It's still early.
It is true. It's true. Just wait till they watch the whole episode.
Exactly.
We've decided that there are very few soft spots on this roster, though, in looking at the final analysis of the 53-man roster, especially after the trades of Dotson and Green, going out and getting Desmond King as well from Houston.
And he didn't even need a shotgun for that one.
Omar just banged on the door and said,
"Don't
make me huff and puff."
That was the scene of him him getting Desmond King was the scene where he walks out in his pajamas, like, 'cause it's in the morning, and they're just like dropping stuff out the window, and he's not even trying to rob anybody. He's just going to get his Honey Nut Cheerios and just stumbles on the Desmond King. That's what Omar Khan did. That's what he did.
Kids, The Wire. Look it up. Sorry.
Gotta watch it. If
you're going to hang through this podcast through more than one episode, there are 2 things you need to brush up on: Mitch Hedberg and The Wire. That's basics, okay?
He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
We will work on the WWE Attitude Era as a supplementary course throughout the season. He's Josh Taylor. I'm Chris Mack. Greg Finley trying to keep us in line as we do talk about, like, I can't believe it, but like, if I had to crown an MVP right now before there is a single snap taken, Josh, it is Omar Khan. I don't think any of us expected the quote unquote cap geek to be the guy who was going to walk in and start wheeling and dealing. We're like, oh, well, Andy Weidl's here. He's the football guy. He'll handle it. No, Omar's that dude.
Remember way back a few months ago, like, back to like when the offseason was ending, or like, when the draft ended last year, and Kevin Colbert was on his way out, and we're like, who's going to be the new guy? Is it going to be him? Is it going to be this guy? Is it going to be Louis Riddick? We honestly didn't know. And there were people that were saying, well, there's a downside to it being Omar Khan because, he's just a cap guy. He doesn't have a lot of scouting experience. Meanwhile, Omar Khan did have scouting experience. We kind of just swept that under the rug. But, there was a question as to who it would be and why it should not be this person. And Omar Khan was the one left standing when it was all said and done. And I don't think anybody's questioning that now. Given the other options at the time, it feels like a steal at this point.
He's been this over the last 12 months, short of Kenny Pickett. And Kenny Pickett's still got a lot of growth ahead of him. We hope his ceiling is a whole lot higher than many of us projected in him coming out of the draft. But over the last 12 months, the star of this franchise has been Omar Khan. I mean, what he's done, I mentioned before the little break there, they haven't had a draft in years where every single pick made the opening day 53. And Corey Trice is the only one who's not making it because he's on IR. Right. Everybody else is on the 53 on opening day, all the way down to Spencer Anderson, the 7th round pick.
And he's got a role.
Yeah, I mean, he's very clearly the backup center, right?
He's the swing guy for all intents and purposes on the line. He's that swing lineman.
It is, I can't believe that they've had, I think I saw it was Brad Spielberger of PFF on Wednesday say, this has been, he used the word flawless to describe Omar Khan's offseason. I don't think he's wrong. I can't look back on anything he's done since he took over, and especially this offseason in particular, and go, oh no, they shouldn't have done that. At this point, maybe the jury is still out on a lot of moves, but at the very least, the jury is still out. And on the ones where we've already kind of come to our conclusions, it feels like it's been the right move every time.
There's two things I'll say to as far as my assessment of this. The first thing, I had this discussion with probably somebody earlier today, and I was having this discussion. I said, look, the stuff that he's done just in the offseason alone, that's what a lot of good GMs do in like maybe 2 or 3 off seasons.
Yeah.
They don't have the great draft and then like some of the free agents that they sign, or all the free agents that they sign, and then the trades that he's made. They do that maybe over the course of a couple years. He did that in like 6 months, Chris. He did it in 6 months. It's bringing in Isaac Seumalo and Patrick Peterson and drafting Broderick Jones and drafting Nick Herbig and drafting Darnell Washington and Joey Porter Jr. You might get that over the course of 2 drafts, or maybe in the first 3 rounds. He did that in like 4 rounds. This is crazy. And then he brings the free agents that he brings in. Then he gets value for Kendrick Green. He gets draft value for Kevin Dotson. The stuff that he's been able to do, I don't say he tripped over Desmond King, but like we mentioned, he walked through the hood in his pajamas and get Desmond Green falling out the window, Desmond King falling out the window. Like all this stuff is happening, and this is all happening in one offseason. The other thing I will say is this: going into the offseason, I had been talking about this. I don't know if you and I had this discussion on the nightly sports call. I know I have with a couple other people. We've been talking about this. I said going into the offseason, there was like a wish list of things I wanted. I'm like, man, it'd be cool to have a guy like Isaac Seumalo on this offensive line. Day 1 of free agency. Boom, there he is. And I'm like, wait, what? They got him? What? So then you turn around, you're like, man, trying to shore up this corner position, a veteran like Patrick Peterson wouldn't be bad. And they get Pat P. You're okay. You're almost like, okay, what else can we get at this point?
Right.
And you going into the draft, and Greg Finley will tell you this, and Greg will tell you for the last 2 years, I have been calling Georgia the Roman Reigns of college football, because they wreck everyone and leave. It's just what they do. And I was telling Greg, I'm like, man, I need some Georgia guys on this team. I don't care who, I don't care how. Get me a Georgia guy. Last year, it was George Pickens. I'm like, good. Give me a Georgia guy, especially a freakish athletic receiver. I won't complain. Then going into this season, they get the starting tackle who's faced pretty much the best pass rushers coming into the league in the last 2 or 3 years. He's faced them in practice every day, in Broderick Jones. And then he gets Darnell Washington, the super freak athlete tight end we talked about in the previous segment. You get all that in one shot? I'm like, man, it'd be great to have a couple of these things. And they got all of them. And I'm sitting there going, okay, well, he's checking off all the boxes for me. And that was before DeMonte Casey was brought back. That's before Keanu Neal was brought in. And that's not counting anything he did with the inside linebacker position. That doesn't any of that. These were things that I didn't even have on my wish list. But he checked off all the things that I did have.
And you know what? All those things you talk about are toppings on the ice cream. They're finishing off the sundae, because the 2 big scoops of chocolate and vanilla in the middle of this thing are somehow turning Chase Claypool into Joey Porter Jr. I mean, that is sort of the crown jewel of this whole thing.
It makes no sense.
You did what? How did you? What? Ryan Pace, I don't know how the man still has a job, but Omar did that. And so it all started with that. It sort of swirled around all year. We kept watching the Bears to see what the Bears were doing. What are the Bears doing? What are the Bears doing? It works out. They get the top pick in the 2nd round, and it works out that Joey Porter Jr. slides to them somehow at 32 after they get their offensive. The cornerstone, keystone should be offensive line.
You know what he told Ryan Pace? You know what Omar Khan told him? He said, boy, if you want to hit on that body, you best hop too. Kids, watch The Wire.
The Wire. Yeah.
Thank me later. Thank me later. That was a season 1 reference, so you'll find that one early.
Oh, yeah. But stick with it. Yeah, don't go skipping around.
Stick around. Trust me. It gets better.
Get through season 3, and it's all, yeah.
Okay.
So Omar pulls all this off, and I guess it circles back around to how we started the show today, which is this is probably the strongest roster they've gone into a season with since you cited 16, probably early 17. 18 for me was still a pretty strong team.
It was still pretty good, even without Shazier.
Right, even without Shazier, they still had the killer bees. And then from there is where things really started to fall off when you had the Bell holdout and then AB blowing up. Anyway, point being, this is a strong roster. And I'm surprised. I'll be honest. I'll bring in the gambling aspect of this for just a second, Josh. They're still sitting at 8.5 wins. They're still sitting at plus money. They're dogs to make the playoffs. I'll admit they can't have too much go wrong because we talked about the soft spots on the roster. You know, we know what this team is if TJ Watt gets hurt, and it's not a playoff team. As good as Kenny Pickett may be, as good as all those other weapons may be. So there are soft spots. But I'll say this. If they stay mostly healthy and things go mostly according to plan, this is now a 10-win wildcard team, I think.
I have 3 questions. Now, looking at this roster now, I have only 3 questions with this team. You already mentioned one. Can they stay healthy? That's number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 is, can they win the division? Because if they can win 11, maybe 12 games, depending on which of those games they win, if it turns into, whether it's sweeping Cleveland and splitting with Baltimore and Cincinnati, that could win you the division if you win 8 other games that are relatively better as far as your playoff resume. That could be useful. And the third thing is, if you do win the division, can you win at least one playoff game? Because I think them winning the division will dictate if they get a home playoff game, which it will, of course. But I think that will dictate if they win a playoff game. Because if they get a playoff game at home, I think they could win one, especially with the style of football they want to play, because it's a style of football that can win you games in January, especially playing at home. So I like that thought. I like that prospect.
And I even think, I'm trying to stay over my skis and not get too far out ahead of myself. I still think they're a wild card team. But I do think you make a good point about the way they're built and the way they're built to win games. I think they could go on the road in a wild card game and upset a division winner. They could go to, like, let's say, for example, I'm starting to come down on Buffalo just a little bit, but let's say Buffalo wins the East, right? And could you not see this Steelers team? Look what they did this is preseason, but look what they did to Buffalo a couple weeks ago. There was a lot of starters involved on both sides of the ball there. Mm-hmm. You go up to, I could see them going up to Buffalo and upsetting the Bills in a wild card game. Would it be the expectation? No, but it wouldn't necessarily shock me either. So because of the way they're built, yeah, you're right. If they get in, they should win a playoff game and break
fun
that streak.
Trivia.
Oh, okay. Give it to me.
Fun trivia, because everybody talks about, the last time we won a playoff game was 2016. You know who they beat in that playoff game in 2016?
Mm-hmm.
Kansas City on the road.
Alex Smith.
At Arrowhead.
Yep.
Mike Tomlin beat Andy Reid on the road in a playoff game. And Chris, here I'm going to go back to the broken record I've been talking about for the past couple of years now. You know how they did it? They ran the ball. They played really good defense, and they won the turnover battle.
Kicked a bunch of field goals. Yep.
And
it worked. And it worked.
They did enough to win that game. Matter of fact, they won 2 playoff games that year. They won one at home against Miami. Miami was never really in it after the first quarter. The second one, they went on the road and just out physical Kansas City. And in that third playoff game, the AFC Championship game, they lost Le'Veon Bell in the first quarter. And if they hadn't, maybe that one turns out differently, because afterwards Belichick was like, "Oh, you have no Le'Veon Bell? Okay, Antonio Brown, you're not in this game anymore," and took it right out of it, and there was nothing left for them to do on offense. The last playoff game, the last 2 playoff games they won, Miami at home and Kansas City on the road, they ran the ball down the other team's throat, they beat up the other team physically on defense, and they won the turnover battle. They're
still finding remnants of Matt Moore under Bud Dupree's fingernails from that first playoff game.
That was a great argument that night on the showdown. I was a panelist on the showdown that night. We were arguing about whether or not Matt Moore should have kept playing, because it was like, how do you bring him back from that? They scraped him up off the pavement. It was crazy.
You'll never convince me that wasn't one of the ones the league didn't look at and go, I think we got to fix this concussion thing.
We got to the argument that night. I'll never forget it. Me and Paul's eyes got into the argument. He was like, well, are you a doctor? I'm like, Paul, it ain't about doctors at this point. It's about lawyers because they don't want another lawsuit because of hits like that. They don't want another $1 billion concussion lawsuit. And Matt Moore just reminded them why.
I don't need to be a lawyer to tell you that man's dead.
Right.
Like,
you don't even need the Chewbacca defense on South Park for that one. You don't even need that. What is this Ewok doing on a planet full of what is this Wookiee doing on a planet full of Ewoks?
What is this Wookiee doing?
It doesn't make any sense. Therefore, you must quit.
When we come back, a classic Josh Taylor segment that we will bring into the fold at least once a week here on Fourth Down in the Steel City. Is this a thing? That's next.
Oh.
And welcome back in. Hopefully you've already clicked subscribe or follow or whatever you have to do. The little notification bell on YouTube if you're watching the show to make sure you get new episodes of Fourth Down in the Steel City version 2.0 as soon as they are ready for you. We prefer you do it in your Odyssey app, but wherever you get your podcast, by all means, go ahead and get it. He's Josh Taylor. I'm Chris Mack. We like the kind that jingles, but we prefer the kind that folds, to paraphrase Coming to America. You didn't think I'd bring Coming to America in the first episode, did you?
I'm so proud. That was wonderful.
Mr. Randy Watson. Anyway.
That boy good.
He good. He good. We're gonna sorry. Let's bring in the guy who tries to keep us on the rails when we go off the rails like this. Our producer, Greg Finley. Greg, it's time to play. Is this a thing? So I'm gonna let you lead off because this is you and Josh on the Sunday morning grind for years on 93.7 The Fan would play. Is this a thing? So I'll let you two gentlemen go first because I got one, but I want to make sure it's up to the standards.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so for mine, Louis Riddick said on ESPN last week that George Pickens is going to have a Pro Bowl type season. So my is this a thing is very simple to that statement. Will George Pickens have a Pro Bowl type season?
Chris, you go first because I gotta collect my thoughts on this one.
I think so. I mean, it's not asking too much. I mean, you've seen the connection between him and Kenny Pickett. I mean, Kenny Pickett has shown he's got, if nothing else, an ability to develop chemistry with wide receivers, with elite wide receivers. Addison at Pitt, right? I mean, Allen Robinson walks in after being acquired from the Rams, walks into training camp, and immediately you start to hear about he and Kenny Pickett developing this chemistry. He's obviously got it with George Pickens. You don't need to put the ball in a perfect spot for George Pickens to turn it into a catch, and more often than not, a highlight reel catch. Anything in the zip code, his catch radius is almost infinite. So, yeah, I think we definitely get a Pro Bowl-like season from George Pickens. He'll be there wherever they're playing the Pro Bowl this year. I don't know if it's in Vegas or Orlando or Hawaii or whatever, if he's even going to go. Do guys even go to the Pro Bowl anymore? It doesn't matter. He'll get named to the team. Absolutely. It's a thing.
It would be great if he got named and didn't have to go because he might have other plans. That would be the ideal. That's always the ideal these days. I want this. I want this to be a thing. I want this so badly. And not just because he went to Georgia. Craig knows why. I want this to be a thing because if George Pickens is a Pro Bowler, that means one of three things. One, that means Kenny Pickett was healthy the entire season, which is definitely what you want if this offense is going to do anything. Two, it means George Pickens was healthy, or if not most of the entire season. And three, it means the offense got to the point where they're able to pretty much dictate. Do we need to throw the ball? Fine, we'll throw the ball. Do we need to run the ball? Fine, we'll run the ball. But it shows me that this offense will have become a fully operational battle station, so to speak. So if those things happen, then yes, I think it's a thing. So, and I think they're capable of happening. It just comes down to them being healthy. And if that's the only thing holding them back, then yes, I think this is a thing.
Yeah.
I think my only concern is, Pickens is such a deep threat for this team. They're going to double him, they're going to put bodies on him. He has had trouble creating separation, but he can go up and get the ball anytime he wants to. But it gets to the point of, will Kenny feed him the ball when he's doubled or, that's my only concern.
Yeah, that's fair. I think we've seen, though, that, like I said, Kenny's willing to put the ball just somewhere in the zip code and let George go get it and come down with it.
I need to see a combination of what happened during the second half of last season, maybe that last 4 or 5 games, and a combination of what we've seen already in the preseason. I need to see George Pickens make plays down the field, down the sideline, of course. But if he can make a play or two inside the numbers, if he can make a play or two between the hashes, if he can catch a touchdown or two like he did to seal that game against the Raiders, like he did against Cleveland, make some plays like he did against Miami. You see that happen, and now you see a guy who's making plays all over the field where it's almost to the point where he's so good you can't ignore him. He becomes Cody Rhodes. He goes from undesirable to undeniable at that point. And that's what happens. But that's the capability that he has. We saw it in the preseason. He took one small, I think it was a post route, made one huge move and turned it into a big touchdown.
Yeah.
He's showing he can not only make plays down the field, but he's showing he can make plays in space. He's showing he can make plays in the red zone. I want to see that full capability. I don't want to just see him develop as a deep threat. I want to see him be the guy that can beat you a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I think that Tampa touchdown in the first game is a good example of you don't have to game plan it big for it to end up being big. And that's
get it to him and let him do it. Really.
Exactly. All right, Josh, you get to go next. Is this a thing?
I'm probably going with a really huge one here. And I've heard so many different analysts and talk show hosts and radio guys talk about, don't sleep on the Steelers. The Steelers are a surprise team. But I've only heard one or two talk about the Steelers' opportunity and possible, likelihood of winning the AFC North. I'm bringing it right back to this because we talked about it just in the previous segment. The Steelers being a legit threat to win the AFC North. And this is with the return of Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. This is with the reloading in Baltimore because they're committed to Lamar Jackson, however long it took them to get there, but they are. And this is with Cleveland, whom everybody keeps saying is back. Is Cleveland the new Texas of the NFL, first of all? Are they the new Longhorns? Because everybody keeps saying they're back and then they prove that they're not. And both teams were orange, so it is kind of weird, but that's not the assist thing. The Steelers being a legitimate threat to win the AFC North. Is this a thing?
I'm not there yet. Because as long as Joe Burrow is somewhat healthy, and I don't believe that calf thing is an issue yet. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe, it'll go a couple weeks and it'll flare up and it'll become an issue. But as long as it's not an issue, I think the Bengals are just too damn good. The Bengals are a 12 or 13 win team. And I don't think you're right. The jury is out on the Ravens. I want to see how Todd Monken uses Lamar. Does he look more like Louisville Lamar, right? Now that he's got weapons to throw to, aside from Mark Andrews to check down to constantly. And I don't believe in Deshaun Watson until I see it. I'm sorry. Until I see Deshaun Watson of the Texans show up again, the Browns is still the Browns, to quote Juju. So, I mean, is it more of a possibility now than it was a month ago? Yes, but I'm still not here to say that the Steelers winning the AFC North is a thing quite yet.
I'm probably a homer for saying this, but I do think that they can win the AFC North. But I said this at the beginning of the preseason and the beginning of training camp. I think they revamped their defense and made it even better by the moves that they made, bringing in a Patrick Peterson, and now they've brought in a Desmond King. They've made their secondary even better, and they helped their offensive line out a ton, bringing Sayamalu in, drafting Broderick Jones. They're going to be able to run the football more effectively. I think that this schedule is so favorable for the Steelers. I have them going 12-5 in the regular season, 4-2 in the division. I think that's enough to win the AFC North, and it's probably going to come down to the final couple of weeks where you're going to have to face off against Baltimore and Cincinnati, and it'll come down to that.
Greg, I have the exact same numbers you do. I have them 12-5, and I have them 4-2 in the division. Therefore, I think this is a thing. But it's not for those reasons. It's not for those reasons. Let's go back to last season. Let's talk about this. Because they beat Cincinnati on the road in week 1. And that game went to overtime, and things kind of got crazy in the fourth quarter, but only because the defense had played so wild and so nuts for those first 3 quarters that Cincinnati kept coming back because the Steelers offense couldn't finish them off because they couldn't run the ball back then. They weren't running the ball like they were in the second half of the season in week 1. If they're doing that in week 1, they close that game out by the third quarter, and it doesn't go to overtime, and it's not even close in the fourth quarter, where Jamar Chase has to get another opportunity aided by a terrible penalty on Minka Fitzpatrick for that to even happen. Also, the second meeting at Acrisure Stadium. Man,
no, it's still Heinz. It's cool.
40s brain. That second meeting at Acrisure Stadium. This is where I remind people. TJ Watt forced a turnover. and the offense had the ball on the plus side of the field with the chance to take the lead in that game. They went 3 and out and never really got anything from it and never got a touchdown out of it. You put this offense in that position last season, that goes differently, and they probably have a chance to score and have a better shot at winning that game because that offense was not what we thought it could be what we saw this season. It just was not there yet. The offense was not what we thought it could be week 1. And remember, Mitch Trubisky was the starter in week 1 and not Kenny Pickett. Mm-hmm. So in a different alternate MCU timeline, perhaps the Steelers sweep the Bengals last season. And we're just going to lean on history and numbers right now. Lamar Jackson and the Steelers, it ain't in the bag, but statistically speaking, it's pretty close because no one beats and tortures Lamar Jackson.
Nope.
Like the Steelers do. So if you want to tell me that their opportunity to win the division is there, if you're talking about just going head-to-head with the teams in the division, with what they did during the offseason, I can't sit here and praise everything Omar Khan did in the offseason in that second segment, Chris.
Yeah.
And say they can't compete with the teams in the division now because that's exactly what they were doing to be able to compete with the teams in the division. And oh, by the way, they were competing with the teams in the division last year because they split with Cincinnati. Yeah. They split with Cleveland, and I think did they sweep Baltimore or did they split with Baltimore? They split with Baltimore.
Yeah.
So they split last year in the division. All you got to change is one game. All you got to change is one game to be 4-2 in the division. And I can give you examples how each of those games could have changed. If Mitchell Trubisky doesn't throw a bunch of picks against Baltimore at Acrisure Stadium, they probably go 4-2 in the division. If they knew how to stop the run game in that Thursday night game in Cleveland, where the schedule was already betraying them after they got beat up by New England, they probably win that one. And if the offense converts after a turnover on the plus side of the field and gets 6 points, maybe they sweep Cincinnati. That's how close it was for them going 4-2 in the division. I think it's a thing.
I'm digging the optimism, but my jury is still out. It's still out. I
get it though. I totally get it. You got to see it first. And that's fine. I totally understand.
Exactly.
I'm the same way with this Cleveland resurgence that everybody says is that's 40 years of experience there that I ain't believing it's a thing until it's a thing. Unless Eric Metcalf is on the field, then I'm just
then all bets are off. You guys both talked offense a lot, and Greg brought up George Pickens. I'm going to talk defense. And one of these guys that I wouldn't say he's flown under the radar, one of these rookies that I feel like is going to have a huge impact. PFF just called him the best run-stopping rookie defensive tackle in the preseason. Keanu Benton. He is a mauler. He is the ring general. He will go in there and absolutely just he will grab you, he will throw you to the ground, and then he will eat your lunch. In this case, the lunch being your quarterback or whoever has the ball in the backfield. So is this a thing? Keanu Benton is the next Casey Hampton.
Oh, I wouldn't call him the next Casey Hampton because I'm hesitant to call any human being the next Casey Hampton because they don't build human beings like Casey Hampton. They just don't. Like, you're not that big and that heavy and that agile and that quick off the line. Like, he was a freak. And everyone's like, oh, they got to find the next Casey Hampton. I'm sitting there going, physically, you may not find him because he was just one of a kind. But I understand what you're saying in terms of the job that he can do and being the next good run stopper on this team. And I was talking to somebody about the 53 man and how Braden Fehoko got left off of it.
Yeah.
And my reasoning for that is I think they really like Keanu Benton. I think they like what he brings. And this is not just one of those hunch things. Let's go back to the Tampa Bay preseason game. They had that 4th down opportunity. Tampa Bay says they're going to go for it. And between Keanu Benton and Isaiah Loudermilk, they blew that thing way up, and it never had a chance. They blew that play up, and it was a 4th and 1, and they got in gaps and made plays and forced that stop. And I think a lot of people were going, was that Keanu Benton that just made that play? I'm sitting next to Chris Hoke watching that game. And we both looked at Benton blowing up that play and Loudermilk blowing up that play, and we're going, oh, okay, this is what we're going to see here? Okay, fine. And I told Chris Hoke after this game was over, I said, the last time we saw this defensive line that deep, you were still playing on it. Yeah. And he didn't disagree with me. And Keanu Benton has a lot to do with that. So if we're seeing what he's capable of is just as far as stopping the run in short yardage, then yeah, I think it's a thing.
Yeah, Greg, I mean, Casey Hampton might be a little before your time, but
I know him.
this is exactly what they haven't had in a long time, is somebody to eat up things in the interior so that those inside linebackers do have a chance to make plays.
Gotta have that guy.
What I'm excited about is how much, it's come to the point of, well, the Steelers can't stop the run. The Steelers can't stop the run. You have a guy like this who came from the Big Ten, from Wisconsin, that all they do in the Big Ten is just ground and pound the football. And so he knows how to stop the run, and he has shown that he knows how to stop the run. That makes me excited.
And Greg, Mike Tomlin's already said it. What Wisconsin does on defense mirrors what the Steelers do. That's why they didn't mind bringing in Benton. That's why they didn't mind bringing in Loudermilk or Nick Herbig for that matter. Yep. They're like, these guys do what we need them to do. So that's why they wanted him here.
Well, you talked about, Josh, about division games that they almost could have won. I look back at the New England game. If they could have stopped the run in that final drive where they milked the clock for over 4.5 minutes, if you would have just been able to stop the run, they probably beat New England. If they would have been able to stop the run, they could have beaten Cleveland on that Thursday night game because Nick Chubb ran all over them. So absolutely. I love this idea that he could be the next Casey Hampton. I don't think he will be as good as Casey Hampton, but he's going to help the run defense so much.
Yeah, I think
he's somewhere on the scale, and it's still a win.
Yeah,
like,
close to it.
Be a reasonable facsimile. Be that like when I tried to fake my report card in 8th grade, and I made a copy, a musty, dusty copy of my real report card at the copy machine at the gas station down the street. And then I tried to cut it up and tape it together and run another copy through. And I had to make sure I had enough nickels because it was 5 cents for each copy. And then I took it home and I tried to explain to my mom why it was black and white instead of in color on the dot matrix printer paper that they would give us. I just need him to be that of Casey Hampton. The twice through the copy machine for a nickel a copy version of Casey Hampton, and it will be better. It's why I think it is a thing, because you keep those interior linemen off of Landon Roberts, off of Cole Holcomb, off of Quan Alexander and Mark Robinson, give those guys a chance to make plays and shoot gaps. Then all of a sudden, 1, 2, 3 yard carries start turning into -1, -2, -3 yard carries. And you're right, Greg, that's how you shut down a drive against an inferior offense like New England's, and you don't end up losing a game that you should win.
I'm over here saluting the 90s chicanery. Oh man, that was a masterclass on how we did dirt in the 90s. I'm envious.
I couldn't let my mom know how many days of school I skipped. I had to cover up the attendance, the days absent part on the bottom of the report card. And
wait, so did she buy it?
No, hell no, she didn't buy it, Greg.
Of course not. There are Gen Zers listening to this podcast going, copy machines? You did it with a copy machine?
Not just a copy machine. Not just a copy machine. The one down the street at the gas station.
You didn't even try the library? Come on, man. At least the one at the library is free. Jeez, Chris. Kids, the 90s were a crazy time. That's all I'm going to tell you.
It's crazy.
The 90s were crazy.
It was OJ and Limp Bizkit and all kinds of mess. So
I'll offer you a facsimile that's not as good as Casey Hampton, but even if it's this, it's still a win. Be a reasonable facsimile of Javon Hargrave.
Yeah. Great call.
Maybe slightly better because he's built a little bit differently than Hargrave. You can be that guy. Even if you're not Casey Hampton, be a better version of Javon Hargrave. Happy. I'll take it.
All right. We have got you covered, Greg. Thank you for captaining Is This a Thing and doing your best to keep us on schedule here in the first episode of 4th Down in the Steel City 2.0. We are up and running for the 2023 season, and this is going to be, by all accounts, a fascinating season. From week 1 against the Niners all the way down through what we believe is a possible playoff appearance. We'll be with you every single step of the way. Daily opinions, news, insight, updates, analysis. It's all with us. He's Josh Taylor. I'm Chris Mack. Thanks to all of you again. Don't forget to subscribe or follow or favorite the podcast wherever you get it, even right here on YouTube. If you're watching the show on the 93.7 The Fan channel, subscribe. You'll get notifications as soon as new episodes are ready, and they will be ready often because we want to keep you plugged in every single day right here on 4th Down in the Steel City.